Hello, mate. This week on the Building Brands podcast, we're joined by Russell Jones. He's the co-founder of Jones Millbank, a B Corp video production agency, and of Nine Tree Studios. Let's get in and look at his LinkedIn. Well, Russell and I have 305 mutual connections on LinkedIn, and his description about himself is this. Russell co-owns and operates Jones Millbank and Nine Tree Studios, a B Corp certified video production company and 10,000 square foot film studio and event space in Bristol. Producing TV commercials, music videos and branded content, our clients include University of Bristol, the Royal Mint, Idols, Dyson and Nestle. Wow, that's quite the spread. Let's see what Jones Millbank has to say about itself. That's his video production company. Jones Millbank are connecting brands to people with creative video content. We're a full-service video production company, they say, taking care of everything from strategy and creative through to production and post. With in-house creative, production and state-of-the-art facilities, we challenge our clients to create impactful digital content and TV commercials, which is one of the reasons why 85% of our clients are repeat. Interesting stuff. What about Nine Tree Studios? Well, it's Bristol's biggest independent film studio. Over 10,000 square foot of purpose-fit studio space for film, television, commercials and events, perched near the centre of Bristol. That's it. Let's get on to learning more about Russell. Hello, Russell.
Hi, John.
Thank you so much for coming on the pod.
You're welcome.
It's what's a delight is, rather than me rushing around setting up cameras, we've come to your amazing studios. This is your smallest room, right?
That's right. Yeah. So, podcast suite normally, but also used for like green room, makeup and stuff.
Yeah.
And then the other two studios are much bigger, yeah.
So what are the other two studios?
So studio one is a 4,600 square foot soundstage. So just like fully blacked out, 6 meters to the bottom of the truss. And then studio two is sort of like a white psych cove. So more suited for like fashion photography, interviews, that kind of thing. Right. And then we've got some green rooms, production offices and meeting spaces as well.
Cool. It's really cool here.
Thanks, man.
You feel like an absolute professional when you walk in through
and
the
we
door.
had a celeb in recently as well, which makes things a little bit more exciting.
Well, you've had several. You had Nick Park.
Nick Park was sat here, that's right, yeah.
Yeah. And you had the Mars.
The Mars, yeah, all three of them.
Yeah.
Although the main one
I'm really here for Ilona.
Yeah.
I mean, I like Olivia as well. And I like the new one. I can't remember her name, but I really love Ilona.
And I should know that, shouldn't I?
Yeah,
but
you should.
Ilona's the main one.
Yeah. But yeah, it's a really good. I just love being here. And Russell is kind enough to let me and my friend Charlie come here and do a ridiculous podcast quite regularly. How long he's going to let us continue to abuse his facilities, I don't know, but we'll see. But today we're here to talk about you rather than talk about anything I'm doing. You are one of the founders of Jones Millbank and Nine Tree Studios, which is where we are. What's your role within those businesses?
Oh, very different now to what it was. Two of us are co-founders, so myself and Adam. We both started Jones Millbank 14 years ago, and then the studio launched last July 2024. We met at film school, so we were both filmmakers by trade, and so we were doing everything in the early days, like we were on the tools.
Yeah.
But so that question for nowadays is completely different. We've shifted both in terms of like what we're good at, not necessarily enjoy, but what we're good at, and what the business needs. Uh-huh. So I sit more on the sort of ops, finance, strategy side, but we also both get involved in all the kind of like day-to-day client pitches and client projects and pitch decks and coming up with concepts, which is the fun bit as well. Yeah. But I haven't touched a camera, or at least I've not been on set properly for like pre-COVID really. Or maybe during COVID, because like of the necessity of having some of our team on furlough and having to like fall back in, but properly by choice probably about 5 years ago.
Yeah. Wow. So the question we ask everybody is, why do you do what you do?
I said I haven't prepped, and I haven't, but a lot of people obviously ask the same thing or a similar thing, and I honestly don't know, aside from I think I was always destined to work for myself.
Right.
But I think I could have gone into a myriad of different things, not even necessarily the creative sector.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know. So I've got some good stories if you're open to them. I mean, they're all illegal,
Always.
so I don't know how podcast friendly they are. But yeah, I just had a history of like at school, at college, like doing illegal shit and sort of just doing stuff and being an entrepreneur, I guess. But I don't want to use that word flippantly because it makes me sound like an absolute...
Yeah.
Is profanity allowed?
Yeah.
You got bleeping? Cool.
Yeah, we can bleep.
Yeah. It makes me sound like a dickhead, right? If you say like, I'm an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I've always been an entrepreneur. At school I was selling. Yeah.
Well, at school, so this is a good fun story, which is completely illegal, but I don't think I'm going to get done for it because I already have. But I got banned from PayPal for selling porn on eBay, which is quite a fun story.
Nice. What, you were like selling vintage magazines or something?
No, just digital porn. It's super easy stuff. This kind of stuff you could just find and download on the internet, but just selling it on eBay. I know, it's weird. And people bought it.
Well, I love
but
that.
So many stories like that. I've had a cease and desist from Mattel Corporation.
For what? Selling Barbies?
No. So actually, this was post uni when I was living in Bristol. There was not a big trend. There was sort of like a trend for kitsch sort of stuff. And I sold Scrabble Cufflinks.
Right.
Literally cufflinks made of old Scrabble tiles.
Which is great.
Yeah. And I owned scrabblecufflinks.co.uk and was generating like when you're like post uni, this is 2008. So like recession, 2009, like just slightly post recession, it was generating like 5 or 10K a year just on top of what me and Adam were doing otherwise for just sticking some metal cufflink backs on some old Scrabble tiles. It was pretty easy money.
Yeah.
But yeah, I got a cease and desist from Mattel because Scrabble apparently is a trademark and you can't have it in a domain name.
No.
So there you go.
Yeah. Oh, when you said illegal, I thought you might be like the 50 Cent of video.
Not
well,
quite.
I was doing quite a lot of coke. I started refining it by the time I got to college because I knew that's where the money was.
Yeah. No, not like that. I guess the short answer is I met Adam.
Yeah.
So I went to uni to do animation for a start. So I didn't even go to uni to do film.
This is a great story.
Didn't really get on with animation because my sort of dream at that point was to go and work for someone like Pixar and like be more in like the 3D digital world.
Yeah, of course.
I picked the wrong course basically, and my course literally the whole of the first year was just hand drawn stuff. And I could draw, but I don't have the attention span to be drawing 12 pictures for 1 second of footage.
Yeah.
So it wasn't for me. In the meantime, I'd met Adam and a few other people that were on the film-based courses, and so I swapped that first Christmas to study film and video instead of animation. And then Adam was on a different course, but yeah, we sort of met from that point, and that's why I do what I do now, right? But had I met someone else doing a different course, it could be wildly different.
Right. Because you could have done anything as long as you were kind of independent.
Not in an arrogant way. I just wasn't fixated on any one path at that point, I don't think. And like, who is when you're 18 or 19?
Yeah.
Like, really?
And mate, I was a shepherd.
Great.
So, yeah, no idea what I wanted to do.
Amazing.
Apart from I wanted to work outdoors. I definitely didn't want to be office-based.
Yeah.
And I loved sheep is a strange way to put it, but I really do love animals. And I loved working with sheep, which is why
I don't think
like,
those things applied to me.
No. But it is. But like you could, if you'd have found something that was completely different, it doesn't mean that it's not an arrogance thing. It's just you're 18. You're not going to be great at anything yet.
The thing I really liked and still really enjoy, like I know we've been chatting about like developments in AI and being able to create web apps very quickly and very easily. That also feels quite similar to actually the very early days of the internet, where it was fairly accessible to build a website, but for those that didn't know how to, it seemed quite complicated.
Yeah.
And I think it's Squarespace, maybe their current or old strap is like a website makes it real. And that's like 100%, particularly in the early days. Like the example of like Scrabble Cufflinks.
Yeah.
Purely because I had a website that looked okay and it had a decent domain name. People thought it was like a legit business. And it was a legit business, but it wasn't like a proper business. It was just me in my bedroom with some IKEA tubs full of Scrabble tiles.
Yeah.
But I really like that like speed of being able to create something from scratch, particularly in the digital world, whether it's a product or a service, doesn't matter. But if you have a website that looks good enough, then people will think it's a legitimate operation, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that applied in the early days. So me and Adam actually started out doing wedding films. Again, we graduated in 2008, so no one was hiring. We sort of fell into working for ourselves, really. We had this idea of filming friends' weddings and then turning it into a business. That became really successful, but again, partly because in 2008, websites on the whole looked a bit crap.
Yeah.
And actually, if you just had one that looked a little bit better, it really elevated you. That's not so much the case anymore, but it still applies to things like web apps and stuff where you can get out there quite quickly and be quite agile in creating a business.
Yeah, but it applies almost conversely now, doesn't it? Like, people expect, if you're a legit business, whatever business it is, that your website will look fantastic.
Yeah.
Like, compared to the sort of stuff that you and I were churning out in 2008.
Yeah.
But you then see businesses which are like lots of law firms have websites that look like they were built in 2008, and they're turning over hundreds of millions a year.
Yeah.
Yet they don't look legit. They look like some high street idiot.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I think you're right in what you say, but it definitely applies the other way now.
It does. Yeah. And a consultant would rightly say that, well, if you actually improved your website, you would either be busier or you'd be able to charge more.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's sort of relevant that, the classic, we're always busy, so we don't need to improve.
Yeah.
A hotel can always increase the prices of the rooms by improving X, Y, Z, right?
Maybe you know what? Maybe you are an entrepreneur. I'm sorry to tie you with that brush, but that's a real entrepreneurial thing to say. I love it. And yes, just to underline Adam's nerdery and what he's saying there. You yesterday, and I'm a nerd, right? I thought I was a real nerd, and often I am. But yesterday, Adam introduced me to a new AI tool that he has used to build a...
Russell, do you mean me?
Sorry?
You said
Russell.
Adam.
Yeah, not Adam. That guy's a prick. Sorry, Russ. Russell introduced me to a new AI tool that he's used in 2 weeks to build himself a CRM and a project management system.
Yeah.
And in 2.5 hours, I've built a system that will read PDFs and shove them into HubSpot.
Yeah,
so
it's insane.
It isn't. Yeah, we were laughing at how much that you can turn around, and your CRM project management system looks absolutely stunning. My HubSpot PO system doesn't look that great
because, aside from aesthetics, like anything that's bespoke will be better, right? Because it does exactly what you need without any of the gumph and without any of the noise.
Yeah.
So by default, but the barrier to entry for that has been huge, even if you are, geeky.
Yeah.
But yeah, this tool, like, lovable. Literally, I went to an AI conference. There was talks all throughout the day, and this was in the last keynote speak, and he didn't even talk about it for any more than 30 seconds. It was a guy who was like a little bit scatty. He was all over the place. And so he was just like, oh, and by the way, there's this thing called Lovable. And he quickly changed Windows away from his presentation. And he just typed in like, build me a copy of Airbnb. And then he went back to his presentation for a bit. And then he came back 5 minutes later. And then he's like, oh, and there it is. And, then you have to build a database and stuff. But like, it genuinely is that quick and impressive. Yeah. But that little 30-second nugget from a whole day of talks about AI has had by far the most impact of any of the talks.
I love that it made it so that we had a long conversation about what you could do with HubSpot and the fact it was going to cost you more money, and then maybe it have to be an investment in other people. Yeah. And you went, fuck it, I'll build it myself.
Yeah.
And I was like that. Okay, well, maybe. Oh God, this is amazing.
Yeah.
Getting in front of thousands of marketers across the Southwest and UK could not be easier. Simply sponsor this podcast, or sponsor the conference, or sponsor both. We don't have any sponsors yet for the podcast. We got plenty for the conference, so the podcast is inexpensive. And if you want to get in front of people twice a month, then this is a great way to do it. Get in touch with me. My LinkedIn URL is in the description. I'd love you to comment below if you know anybody who we should have on this podcast. Put their name below. I'll reach out. And since we don't have a sponsor at the moment, let me tell you about my other podcast. It's called the 5-Star Podcast. I host it with my friend Charlie Hunt. She is a fantastic fractional finance and operations director, and we review other people's reviews of businesses and all sorts of things that we find online. It's filthy, so don't go there if you don't like bad language. If you like bad language and sexy talk, come right along. In the meantime, though, let's get back to the incredible Russell Jones of Jones Milbank. and you've moved more into operations, as as most agency owners do, or business owners do. They end up being operations or sales, right? Basically, it's really cool that you and Adam are. Does Adam primarily do more of the sales?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, mate, that's really good.
Yeah,
that's really good. I did that with my wife
again, and not necessarily because we enjoy it.
Yeah, no,
but
of course.
Because that's what we're certainly better at than the other person, at least.
Yeah. I did it with my wife, and it meant that we would go home and talk about business all the time. If you're doing it with Adam, who I'm pretty sure isn't your wife.
He's not. No.
Which is a shame. You'd make a lovely couple. But at least you get to have that separation. And you can come back and finish whatever argument you started at 4:30.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
That's really nice. This is probably going to have two answers, right? Because you've got Nine Tree Studios, which is where we are, which is the building and the facility, and then you've got Jones Millbank, which is the production company, right? Is that right? Have I described those right?
Yep, I'd say so.
So how do they do what they do differently to other people? Well, it's almost like what makes you successful, I suppose.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one because we're also in the midst of like having to look at that ourselves and change how and what we do for Jones Millbank. But in terms of where we got to where we are, I mean, it genuinely does stem from the early days of like doing wedding films, just the two of us. So the story, the 14-year story in a nutshell is we did weddings for, in total, about 6 years at the start.
Wow.
Until it slowly dwindled out. So there was a peak in there of maybe 2 or 3 years in, we were doing like 80 weddings a year.
Wow.
That's when we started working with Joffy, who's now a full-time employee with Jones Millbank, but he was helping us out as a freelancer on weddings. The weddings grew, and we were starting to do the corporate stuff alongside. So basically, as the economy started to pick up after 2008, we started to grow the corporate side. We always said that once the corporate revenue surpassed the wedding revenue, we'd just kill off the weddings. We didn't quite do that because it's quite hard to say no to 75 grand just like the next day, right?
Yeah.
Which is, so basically with the weddings we never went over the VAT threshold because we'd have to start charging VAT to B2C clients. But basically we gradually fizzled it out because people booked weddings so far in advance. We actually had a few bookings we had to sort of honour like another year or two later, hence the course 6 or 7 years it was in total.
Yeah.
But then the corporate side started to grow, and like any business really, you get too busy for the two of you, so you employ one full-time person, and then gradually need 2 and then 3 and then 4 and so on. So we're 11 today. We've been 14 and up at our peak. And so it's been an organic evolution, and we're good at what we do because of those original days when it was just me and Adam doing everything. We really noticed how much of a relationship you build with clients by spending 8 hours a day with them during the production.
Of course.
And so when we were thinking in those early days of like, well, do we hire a full-time camera operator? And also in those early days, there was lots of worries about that because it was just me and Adam, and this thought of employing someone full-time, they'd be with us a year and then they'd run off and steal all our clients. Yeah. That was like a real fear.
Yeah.
It didn't happen, so the fear is baseless. But it was that, do we hire someone full-time or do we just use a freelancer? And this idea of getting to know a client in the sales process, getting them to trust you, building a rapport, selling them the idea, doing all of that incredibly hard work, and then saying, oh, and then John is going to be doing the filming.
Yeah.
And we'll just be back at the office doing more sales. It didn't sit right.
Yeah.
And also it didn't sit right for us. And also the risk of them not doing a good job always played on our minds.
Yeah.
So that's why we kept that's how we basically started what we still have today, which is an in-house ethos. So whilst now we're doing much bigger productions like TV commercials and music videos, we do have to use specialist freelancers, and we use specialist freelancers quite regularly. So like camera assistants, obviously hair and makeup, gaffers, electricians, etc. The core team of like the DP, the director, the producer, etc. They're all full-time members of staff. And Adam talks a lot about this a lot better than I do because he's obviously on the sales side, but I think you can see in our work that level of like warmth that comes through,
right?
Particularly from anything that's interview based, but even if not interview based, most of our work involves people's stories in one form or another, even if scripted, right? So even if it's a music video and it's a completely fictitious story, there's still people involved. We do very little content where there's not a person involved in some way, shape or another. And so I think that, yeah, that ethos helps you work with talent, right? It eases them. You build a rapport much quicker because our team aren't having to worry about building a rapport with their crew member next to them because they've been working with them for 6 years.
Yeah.
It's just, that's already done.
Yeah.
So they can focus on the talent.
Yeah.
Whether that's an actor or a contributor or a real person, whatever.
Yeah.
And I think the benefits of that come through in the final film. And so that's what makes us quite different on the Joe's Back front, because most production companies have the complete opposite business model where they only have salespeople, account managers, producers in-house, and all of the production, all of the crew is outsourced.
Right. Even at this very senior level, because of course, where I guess I know you and Life Media are my two go-tos for people who I know who understand video, particularly, corporate.
It changes as you go up, and so this is why we're in the midst of having to look at do we shift. So when you're a small minnow, I'd say sort of around where we are, if not smaller, like under 10, you can get by and do all those things I've just said with an in-house team.
Yeah.
But when you're working on much bigger budget productions, there is an expectation that you work with freelancers.
Yeah.
And there is an expectation that you'll be putting freelance directors forward for a project rather than just using internal directors. And a lot of that makes sense, right? So if, there's no way that we could pitch for like the John Lewis Christmas ad with only an internal team.
Yeah.
They would want a director who has done similar Christmas ads for similar brands before. And you would never get to that point in an agency's lifespan where you've got all that experience, all that portfolio.
It's like you open up the cupboard of directors and pull out the one who does car ads.
Exactly, 100%. And actually, you speak to most production companies that look quite big and you realise actually it's just two people, all like both working from home, and they just have relationships with lots of freelance directors and they just put forward that person because they use their portfolio to win the project, then they field the crew. It's a very different business model. But as we're growing, and the budgets are increasing on projects and the scale and scope of the projects are increasing and the expectation is changing, we're having to look at how we work in that industry and therefore what our USP is.
Yeah, that's quite a difficult balance to get if you because I imagine that part of the reason you do it this way is because you enjoy it, and then you're proud of the product that you produce, right?
And the team enjoy it.
Yeah, exactly.
3 of the team have been with us for 7 years, and so they've been all working together for 7 years, and so even they're very open to the idea of working with freelancers, but also there's a lot of hard work to be done there in building up the same level of rapport and trust you have with someone you've just met than someone you've been doing your job with for the last 7 years.
Yeah, and you'd think it would be really easy because 3 of them are really cool. Like if they're all out and they know each other, and then you bring one new person in, and particularly if that person's a director and they're senior and artistic, I would imagine that can lead to a certain amount of unwarranted friction out of nowhere.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah.
Wow.
But this is a lovely segue. So actually, if we change business models, our USP becomes the studio.
Yeah.
Because actually, like I said, most of those production companies are quite small in terms of their core operation and full-time team members, and there's not many therefore that have a facility like our studio. So then weirdly our USB becomes the studio, and then the studio's USP is sort of, not that it's neither here nor there, but obviously studios are very like location proximity based, so the USP is that we're in Bristol would be one of them, right? Like we've had production companies come from London because the crew and talent were in Bristol. We've had production companies come from London because we're much cheaper than London, because it is cheaper than London. Like land costs less. And we're sort of like another USP for the studio is that we've got an attached production company. So whilst we're very careful not to tread on the toes of other production companies coming in, we've designed it knowing what all the pain points are like for a production company to fix those. And then also there's people always here to fix problems or hire kits out or, help with rigging and all that kind of stuff.
So that's it. That's really slick. It's almost like you thought it out. Did you think it out like that?
We did think it out. Okay. Studio's been in the works for like 3 or 4 years. In the planning, or at least in the like that's the next move sort of thing.
And it's a really boss move. I know that probably in your world when you're going to other studios, like that one that you drive by on the M4 when you're going past Reading,
Shinfield.
And it's like, wow, that's something else.
That's the next level.
But it's so weird coming in here into what looks like a nice industrial unit,
Yeah.
and then there is just a huge black box.
Yeah.
And it, like, you shut the doors and it's the same as being in the old BBC TV centre.
Yeah.
It's the only kind of reference I've got. It's like the floor's black, the ceiling, everything's black, and it's like, this is like properly professional. But knowing you and Adam, I should know that it's going to be properly professional, but it's so surprising to see something so good in Bristol.
Yeah.
What's Bottle Yard like? Because that's...
Yeah, so this is where we sit. So we're not quite at the level of the Bottle Yards and the Shinfields. I say not quite, we're nowhere near. Like that's a completely different kettle of fish. You know, like Shinfield, I think last time I looked it up, is like a £500 million investment from like a US asset firm type thing.
And you've only had 400 million here, haven't you?
Yeah, only 400, yeah. So we're only a bit off, 20% off. We sit more for like on the commercial side, so TV commercials generally don't need studios that are that big. Mm-hmm. So we sit more on that side. We also facilitate a few broadcast pieces. We've actually got the BBC in a few weeks doing some smaller stuff in Studio 2. And interestingly, in a few weeks, we've got someone in for the whole week just doing costume fitting for a production, but not in, like the actual filming isn't taking place that week. They're literally just getting 100 background extras in for the week.
Yeah.
Like fitting them with costumes and then sending them away, and then I presume the filming is in like a month or two's time. But so we sit at this sort of smaller, more agile, more affordable level, really. Like the likes of Bottle Yard, who we're pretty close to, and they refer people to us, and vice versa, is like a complete
next step up.
It's next level, it's next level. Like we would never get to that level, nor would we want to, because you're a landlord, you know, you've got a huge facility to manage, let alone like the costs of the land, and like it's, you know, I mean, as you know, Bottle Yard's owned by the council, and so it's very much about attracting talent to the region and attracting productions to the region. But I wouldn't want to own it at all, no.
That's a whole different level of operations, and all sorts of taxes and hideousness. Cool. So it's quite a journey that you've been on. God, I've said journey. You've said entrepreneur by accident. With just a couple. I mean, this is great.
With just a couple of white douchebags.
Exactly. It's almost like we're a living LinkedIn post. Never mind.
The one thing I learned about business from selling porn on eBay.
Mate, you know how that would go on fire, wouldn't it? Even more so if you were doing it on a canal towpath, holding your phone like that.
Yeah. Or taking a selfie when my eyes are closed. I love those ones. Like someone's crying and they're like...
Ah, dear. Maybe that's what we should have a thread where on LinkedIn, which is just reposting white douchebag posts about business. But if you were to go back and give yourself some advice on any part of this journey, like and it might be when you're in college, or it might be like when you were starting, or it might be like 4 years ago or whatever. When would you go to, and what advice would you give younger Russell?
That's a real tough one, because I'm quite a pragmatist, and so I feel like sort of like butterfly effect, right? Like things have worked out the way they have because of all of those minutiae things, and change one tiny little thing and it could be in a completely different place. So, you know, had I not met Adam at uni as one thing, I wouldn't probably be living in Bristol. So he was like the anchor to Bristol, which means, you know, I wouldn't be with the wife who is our 15-year anniversary this week. Wouldn't be living where I am, wouldn't have the dog I have, like wouldn't have the friends I have, like everything would change completely.
Well, your whole life is Adam based.
Yeah, but then, you know, like like the butterfly effect, right? Like I only went to that uni because I got into Bournemouth as well to do animation.
Which is the one, right?
I only went to, it is the one, and I went to Newport, which is a shithole. So the only reason for that is because my girlfriend at college was going to Swansea, and I wanted to be closer to her and not as far away as Bournemouth. Yeah. So all of these little things, and like then you could trace that back to like, well, how did I meet my girlfriend? And actually, or change any one of those things, and like today would look completely different. Yeah. So I don't think any of my advice would be to change like anything or do anything differently, even if some of those things would make a positive outcome. Yeah. I don't think you could pick and choose to do that. I think if you change something early doors, you change everything. Yeah. So advice would maybe just be, it sounds like a right dick, right? It's just like, I don't know, do the same thing, just like trust that it will work out. Don't be worried when like, you know, and we were unemployed for like 8-12 months when we first graduated, because no one was employing anyone.
Yeah.
Hence why we started doing our own thing.
Yeah.
So just, trust it'll work out and don't fret, I guess.
I love that. And actually, it's not too different from what I've heard other people say.
Yeah.
Which is, and a lot of them will go, well, actually, this was a pivotal moment. So
Yeah.
I would say there.
Yeah.
Whereas I really like your pragmatism and stoicism.
That
there.
doesn't mean that everything's been great either, right?
No.
Like the last 2 years, as you know, have been incredibly challenging for agencies of all shapes, sizes, and
Yeah.
services and products. Like really stressful. And at times you think, you are like, oh, probably should like wish I hadn't done the studio, because that's just like another financial burden at
Yeah.
a time when finances are already challenging and sales are incredibly challenging and our competitors are falling off left, right, and centre, and we're just trying to survive. But this is without knowing what the next 5 or 10 years holds.
Yeah.
Right? And it might be that in that period, things boom again, the studio's amazing, we sell it to Warner Brothers for £10 million. Who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah.
You just, I guess it's the classic, you have to take the risk to find out what happens. You can't just sit on your laurels and do nothing.
Yeah. So Russell Jones' advice is fuck around and find out.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. And get banned from eBay.
That, I think, is a lesson for us all. That's a great place to end. Russell, thank you so much for being on this.
You're so welcome.
Where can people find you or your businesses online?
Me on LinkedIn, although I don't post as much as I should, but who does? Jones Wank is joneswank.com and 9treestudios.co.uk.
Cool. Brilliant. Thanks ever so much for being on.
You're welcome. Thanks, John.
Thanks ever so much to Russell for joining us. His information is in the description. And if you know of anybody you think should be on the pod, then hit me up. My information is in the description too, and I'll get them on the pod. And if you're enjoying this, please give it a like. And why not subscribe? It doesn't cost you anything, and it means a whole heap to the Building Brands team. Thanks ever so much, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks.